The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week, we're going to talk about Austin FC's record signing Brandon Vazquez. We'll discuss the possibility of Sebastian Driussi being sold and what that would mean for Austin FC. We'll give our thoughts on new Austin FC signing Ilie Sanchez, and then discuss which positions Rodolfo Borrell should target with the remaining roster spots. My name's Landon Cottom, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley, and good to be back in a slightly more controlled environment. Maybe miss sitting right across from you, but mostly, like, what a difference 2 weeks makes since we last recorded. I mean, we were as often like struggling to think about what we were going to have to talk about, and then we had, 2 months worth of news happen between the last time we recorded a real newsy show and this one.
Yeah, 2 episodes ago was the one that I recorded on my own. I did it in 15 minutes, and it was mainly about the super draft and a player that we ended up not signing. This is just to say this. Jeremiah, do you even remember the names of the players we drafted in the super draft?
No,
because I didn't until I looked it up today.
I remember we got an international roster slot out of the super draft for trading away, and maybe some GAM. That seemed to be the most meaningful thing out of the super draft. Yeah, so this is definitely a takeaway from when you would spend all this time like researching super draft players, and I think it's newsy and it's exciting, and I think this speaks to like the club's possible ambition about what they're willing to do. So I can't wait to get into this show and kind of talk through everything that's happened.
Yeah, before we jump into the news, let's do a little recap of what's happened in Moon Tower Soccer World the last couple of weeks. We had our New Year's Day hangout, which was a lot of fun as usual. Had a good turnout. Did it at Hop Squad, and the Hop Squad folks were kind to us. Got to talk to some old friends, some new friends, some folks we've met in person once or twice, and got to see again. So that was very, very good again.
Yeah, and I wanted to add to that, from remembering going and buying beer and packing coolers and chairs and like throwing a TV in the car and all that stuff. I mean, my main takeaway when we were at Hop Squad, just like ordering beer that somebody else brought to us and getting to enjoy it, was like, why haven't we done this before? Like, why were we putting ourselves through the effort of doing it the way we had before? And then at the end, 2 hours in, we had decided to walk over to the stadium and have the last ceremonial beer over by where the kind of up where we used to meet up, but where the Cap Metro station was. There was a good crowd that was happy to walk over there and enjoy like one final beer and hang around. And then when it was getting cool, everybody was also happy to like beat the path out of there. But like that was such a fun, great time to meet some people. And it's great that some folks who had listened for years and never had the chance to make it out finally got the chance to make it to one. It was great to meet some people who've been listening for a week. Also, and chose a very interesting show to get it involved in. So maybe we should also cover the other thing we did last week.
Yeah, so we met a new listener named Diane. Was her name Diane? I think I got that
so.
right.
Yeah.
And her son Matthew. They came out to the New Year's Day thing. Diane told us that the Moon Tower After Dark episode was the first episode she had ever listened to, and I just died laughing and had to go like tell a group. And she's like, "I liked it. I don't know why you're reacting that way." It's like, well, it's just much different from our normal shows, but yeah, she said she was into it, and she got to talk to Mike and Steph about Swoon Tower, and she was really excited about it all. So Diane, thanks for listening, and Matthew, thanks for showing her that, even though maybe it was a bad idea for that to be the first one, but I'm glad it turned out well.
Or she's listening this week and she's like, this show is very boring. This is not at all what I got myself into.
Yeah. We all survived the Moon Tower After Dark thing. I think Steph Crignola barely survived, but Mike and Ashley took very good care of us, and Ashley went and got us pizza, and we hung out and kind of walked it off, so to speak, until Steph was ready to get back in a car. And then but that was so much fun, and I was nervous about putting that out. I absolutely hated editing that episode because I was so irritated with myself and the sound of my own voice by the end of it. That, and also another thing. So my recording setup, this is boring technical stuff. My recording setup is generally only recording myself and then the computer output of Jeremiah. So the setup of having 4 mics going into it, I wasn't used to. I had to change some settings and accidentally changed a setting that did multi-track recording. And so everything got combined into one track. And so when I was being a loud idiot and someone else was trying to say something, I had no control over backing that off and giving that more volume. And so that made it hard to edit. And then the sound of my own voice made it hard to edit. And so I just, all that to say, come publishing time, I was a little nervous about what folks were going to think of the episode. Feedback has overwhelmingly been very positive and people seem to really like it. It hasn't been entirely positive. I don't think some folks enjoyed the change of tone, but we warned them ahead of time. I would like to say that the comments and opinions of the hosts of Moon Tower After Dark do not necessarily represent the opinions and values of the hosts of Moon Tower and Swoon Tower Soccer. And if you would like to complain, please send your comments to moontowerafterdark@hotmail.org.
There you go. Yeah. Or as I often say, nighttime Jeremiah creates problems for morning Jeremiah. And morning Jeremiah is usually very mad at nighttime Jeremiah, but there's nothing he can do other than sort of shake his head and wonder what happened. So it's a good time. I know people have asked for more. I feel like once a year is the perfect cadence for that type of show. Like we should only be that dumb and that drunk once a year. And then it's entertaining and novel for everybody. I don't think we need to do that any more often than that. And I might need 360 days to recover also.
Yeah. We don't want to wear out our welcome for sure. All right, let's get into the news. So we were blessed by Uncle Tony's green smoke this morning. Jeremiah, tell us what that was all about.
That was all about Austin FC announcing the club has reached a club record transfer agreement to sign 26-year-old forward Brandon Vazquez from CF Monterrey and Liga MX. A lot of folks remember him being very, very good in Cincinnati, particularly in 2022 when he was I think he was both an All-Star and MLS Best 11 player. So he's going to be a designated player on a 4-year contract guaranteed through the end of 2028 with an option for 2029. Will wear the number 9. Jesse Sardes did not get his number retired. So somebody else will get it again. And the only facts that the club said was that it was club record, but we believe it to be around 10 million based upon just the reporting from a lot of places. Tom Bogert was all over this multiple times, right, with the updates that was going on, and lots of other folks too from different places. So huge signing, huge show of ambition for Austin. I think it's probably without a doubt like the biggest name at the time of signing that Austin's ever made, right? Like nobody knew who Sebastian Driussi was when Austin signed him. Jesse Sardes was like a big name, but also very clearly past his prime. I think in terms of excitement for fans, this has to be the biggest signing in club history.
Yeah, I'd say by a long shot. Like you said, Driussi became our biggest signing, but at the time we did not know that was going to be true. This is very high profile. Brandon Vazquez, like you said, one of the best players in MLS for a couple of years, right when he broke out, went to Monterrey. We'll talk about his time in Monterrey a little bit here in a little bit, but fringe U.S. men's national team player at this point. Wouldn't be surprised if he gets some playing time and scores some goals if he gets called into a camp at some point. But yeah, it is huge. Going back to some of the details, putting together the show notes for this show between Brandon Vazquez and the Driussi stuff, which we'll get into later, it seemed like over the past few days, stuff was changing by the hour. And I just stopped updating my notes. I went through over the weekend and was making some notes for the show. And I just start putting in like X's as placeholders, like put in the details whenever this shakes out. And this is where we finally got to with this one. But there's a lot of, I don't know, maybe misinformation or incorrect information. There were some rumors that his contract at Monterrey was going to be terminated and that he was going to be a free agent. Tom Bogert came out not long after that and said this is not true, which makes a lot of sense, right? Monterrey paid $7.5 million for him from Cincinnati, and I think he has at least a year on his contract, if not more than that. it would have been, even if they like he wasn't in the plans, they didn't want him anymore. He's such a valuable asset. You have to try to get some money out, and that's what they ended up doing. And so Bogert was pretty salty about some of that and was lecturing folks about media literacy and not believing everything you see on Twitter, which I applaud that.
Which everybody needs a little bit. I forgot at the end of this transaction, the most MLS, my favorite part of this.
Oh my God.
Is because to complete the transaction, Austin had to be at the top of Major League Soccer's waiver order. So they ended up also trading 50,000 in 2025 GAM and 50,000 in 2026 GAM to the San Jose Earthquakes. There you go. The new and improved GAM chant. You want to talk about that?
That's right. Yeah, we got at the New Year's Day hangout. I wanted to take advantage of the crowd and get a bigger, beefier GAM chant. I did, however, do some studio magic and layered in the original GAM chant on there as well, because I didn't want to erase the original founders of the GAM chant. I know Matt Arnold was one of the instigators. Do you remember who else?
Moises was one of them too.
Okay. Yeah, I remember he was there. So yeah, apologies to whoever else was part of that. But you are still within here. If you listen carefully, you'll still be able to hear the original GAM chant layered in. But anyway, this whole waiver order thing, my advice to you as a listener, like, and this is coming from us, don't worry about it. Don't waste brain space on it. It doesn't matter. It's a weird MLS thing. It's not that much money. And just go on about your day. Read the rest of the press release and don't worry about it.
Yeah, that's very fair. And then because I think we can say this now, like our friend Adrian Healy, who we had lunch with a few weeks ago, who told us he was staying in Austin and working for La Liga, and has now appeared on KUT as a DJ, as his like a side gig, which is cool. We asked him about it, and I think he had a really great take on it, which he also tweeted later, which is why I feel fine reading his text. Said a perfect, a number 9 in his prime, and the sort we've never had. Highly motivated to get in the national team picture, and I think we can talk about the narrative around that. We might have, think we overpaid, but a position worth overpaying for. So I agree with all those things, and I think there's an argument that Austin paid a lot, but maybe didn't overpay, depending upon how this turns out.
Yeah, I mean, like talking about the price, how did it go from him being free to, and then there was like $6 million, and then all of a sudden Bogert saying 10, and then today again after the deal is done, Bogert repeated the $10 million number. So that's apparently what his sources are still telling him. The answer to the first one is the free thing was never happening anyway. But as far as like his value as a player, his transfer value, he is familiar with this league. He has scored a lot of goals in this league before. He's also a domestic player, so he doesn't use an international roster spot. That makes him quite rare of a profile. And Liga MX teams have done enough business with MLS teams to know that. All that said, like if 10 million is the real number, I think that's probably too high. Transfermarkt has that as the 12th highest inbound transfer in MLS history, if their numbers are accurate. I do think it's probably too high. That Monterrey probably knew that MLS teams are hungry for Mexican American players, period. But then also American players of high quality who won't count as an international roster spot. All that said, I'd rather them overpay than not get us a damn striker.
Right.
We've just not had that. We've never had a striker. And like the fact that they've tried and failed to sign other attacking positions, but it seems like they've never even really tried to sign a high-profile striker before.
And they've paid a lot to Zardes and Danny Houston. Not even, honestly, like relatively a lot, but nothing compared to probably what this deal is going to be. And, another thing on the value, I was talking to Michelle Sanchez about this yesterday, and she's talking about, the fact that he's played in Liga MX and scored a few goals is a huge deal in terms of visibility for Austin FC. Because she's like, I've got people who've never watched MLS that are certainly perking up because of him. So I know I've watched some film. You watched some film. Like maybe talk about his playing style and maybe how we expect to see him fit in. Although obviously there's another big question mark about about the attacking front that we'll get to after the break. But like, let us know what he's like as a player.
Yeah, first I want to touch on his background a little bit real quick before we go into playing style, because he's originally from San Diego, Mexican American family. His first pro club was Tijuana, so he would go across the border every day to train with Tijuana. Didn't ever get first team minutes there, but a good experience for a young player like that nonetheless. And then talking about like the visibility of him playing for a huge team like Monterrey, and the fact that he's a Mexican American. We have had some Mexican Americans on the team, but not a high profile one like this, not one that's played big minutes in Mexico. Like the visibility, and then just like having a big chunk of the fan base feeling seen like that. I think that'll go a long way for that as well. Ended up getting his first MLS deal at Atlanta. That was in the heyday of Atlanta with Tata Martino, Joseph Martinez, Miguel Almiron. He was not getting a lot of chances there. And so Nashville took him in the expansion draft and then immediately traded him to FC Cincinnati for $150,000 in GAM. He was a sub for 2 years in Cincinnati, broke out in 2022, and the rest is history. He ended up being one of the best strikers in the league for a couple of years and then was sold to Monterrey for $7.5 million. Talking about his playing style, I'll go through like 4 traits. First one being physicality. He's 6'2", 200 pounds, and knows how to use it. So he's good in the air, good at getting onto the ends of crosses to put headers in, can also drop in and act as a focal point for the attack and uses his body to hold defenders off. Another thing that I really like, and maybe this is my favorite thing about him, is his movement. He moves really well off the ball, really crafty in the box. Austin has never had a striker with both of these things, like the ability to make intelligent runs and the athleticism to use that intelligence to his advantage. So we've had guys who arguably did one or the other of those things, but not both. And he's not speedy in the way that like Bukhari is. So he's not dribbling guys. He's not going to take guys on 1v1 in that way, but he is fast enough at his top speed to get in behind the line at times, or whenever he is making that off ball run in the box, he is fast enough to ghost past the defender when making that run. And then he also has the ability to get shots off really quickly. And I really like that of him as well. His work ethic is really strong. Was in a system in Cincinnati that requires guys to work really hard and to press and defend. And he did that really well. And then by all accounts, his character is really strong as well. Just a humble, hardworking guy, professional on and off the field, and really well liked in the locker room. So I think there's a lot to like in this guy.
Yeah, and that'll one of the things that I think a lot of people, like including me, were worried about with the people that left Austin FC during this last offseason is what that would have effect-wise on just locker room, character. You know, you lose Alex Ring, you lose Ethan Finley, you lose some guys who are kind of these glue guys that are leaders. And I think this one, and then the other player that we'll talk about coming in, which seems like a million years ago, but is 6 days ago, like definitely help fill that gap. So it's great to see Austin recruiting guys who are both good players and good dudes and will contribute overall to sort of the chemistry and the success of this team.
Yeah. And worth mentioning that him and Gallagher were teammates at Atlanta and Atlanta United too, as well. So he'll have an instant connection there. And then if Driussi's still around, they would have been all-stars together too. What are our concerns about Brandon Vazquez?
I mean, I think 2022 was a high water mark. So we're not coming off a guy that had that just had an MLS best 11 season. He's young enough that I think the age wall is not a concern, but he wasn't quite as productive in 23. Obviously things went wrong in Monterrey and he was not part of the plans. Now I don't know that you can read too much into that, just because if you think at the level of spending that and the level of guys that Monterrey can bring in, because they can money whip a problem in a way that MLS clubs can't. That's fair. It can just be sort of preference. But I mean, those are probably my 2 big concerns. It's like, it's not that he's immediately coming off this best 11 season. So like there are things that he hasn't been as good as he was in 2022, which is very very Austin FC like.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I do think, like, looking at his time in Monterey, he got off to a really quick start there. Fans loved him. He was scoring goals. And then for whatever reason, he stopped getting minutes. I think had some high profile misses as well. But then last year just did not get that many minutes, didn't get that many opportunities. All that said, his numbers were quite good for the limited minutes he played. If you look at his real stats, so like goals per 90, just kind of metrics per 90, they're all quite good, even though he played limited minutes. And then if you look at kind of the ghost stat kind of things as far as XG and stuff like that goes, also quite good. So he had a poor season by Monterrey's standards, but they are one of the most expensive teams, if not the most expensive team in North America. Their standards are going to be a little bit different. I think Austin FC's standards are different than that. And say he scores 10 goals for us. Maybe that's a little disappointing compared to what we can do. That would be the most goals scored by an Austin FC striker in a single season. If he scored 10 goals 2 years in a row, he would be the second leading scorer at any position in Austin FC history.
And he would still be 28 also at that point.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, right. I would only say what I said so that like people aren't, we could be excited, but be a little bit realistic. And there's still some building that needs to be done around him. But there's no doubt this is a powerful, impactful signing. One other thing that I think it was Bogert that mentioned is that the fact that Austin has had the interest in breaking their own team transfer record twice in the last 7 months or whatever, with bringing in Bukhari and then him, and then not worrying about buying out Driussi Zardes, seems to indicate that the money well is not dry yet, at least.
Yeah. Maybe let's take a break. When we come back, we are going to get into the Sebastian Driussi stuff and whether or not we think he's going to go and what it would look like if he does go. We'll talk about the Ilie Sanchez signing, which, again, as of a week ago, was the most exciting thing happening. Now it's third or fourth billing. And then we'll talk about some other player rumors or maybe dead player rumors as well. Hang tight. We'll be right back with more Moon Tower Soccer. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FEF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FEF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community transparency and client education. And they have their own podcast called Summary Judgment. You can check it out wherever you get your podcasts. And I want to say, I feel like this is the ad read we butchered the most, maybe, on the After Dark episode. And I don't know how all of us couldn't get your the middle line of your next read, given how many times we've done it. So, one, apologies to the FBF folks on that. And two, I got my calendar today, and it's great, but we could talk about that in a future ad read.
Oh, yeah. You can go to FEF.law to find out what makes FEF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's FEF.law. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that served the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. As a credit union, Amplify has no shareholders or parent companies. That means more of your money stays in the community. Amplify has been the home of fee-free banking since 2022. Their free checking accounts come with 0 overdraft fees or minimum balances. That means Amplify's fee-free checking accounts help you get more mileage from your everyday spending. Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident. Learn to trust your bank again at Amplify Credit Union. To learn more and to register for free parking at the Amplify Esperanza branch on game day, go to www.goamplify.com/moontower-soccer. All right, we are back. Let's jump into transfer window business and some of the things that might be incoming and outgoing over the next couple of months.
Let's do that. One thing before we get into the specifics about players, because one of the things that kept coming up in like on social media and in chats is like, well, I thought the window doesn't open until January 31st. Like we can't bring players in or out or whatever. And the transfer window is really just a paperwork thing, and you can make deals whenever you want, and you can announce deals whenever you want, and that's why we get, I assume, like the Vazquez news. He's probably not going to be able to be registered with the club until after January 31st. But like, don't read too much into that. I know everybody gets very calendar focused, but the window closing
and that's
meaningful.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I think that's especially true just because of the league that Austin plays in. for all the big European leagues, the winter is a short, specific transfer window, whereas MLS, we've got months in between. And so there is this time where they're not playing games. They can be kind of doing this wheeling and dealing, and teams do and have for years announced stuff in November, December, early January of signings that they've made. And like Jeremiah said, they're not going to register them, but it is pretty normal. So I saw people justifying the fact that we haven't made any signings because the transfer window doesn't open until January 31st. And I'm like, no, that doesn't really matter. It means we haven't made any signings.
It doesn't make sense. Yeah, because at the point when the Ilie Sanchez deal happened, I think there were 6 teams left that had not made a signing, and then obviously like businesses picked up. So let's hit the big potential outgoing move. Like Sebastian Driussi, I think not even every window, but like constantly, there's this rumor about him going back to Argentina. There's a rumor about him going back to Riber. There was there was some English team, Leeds or something, he was connected to at some point.
I think that one was real. And that one was believable at the time, right?
Yeah.
One of the best players in MLS, maybe the best player in MLS, that a mid to lower level Premier League team was interested. Yeah, that sounds right. The River thing also comes up a lot and has always felt unrealistic to me. Yes. And that's why, like, the start of last week or the last few weeks, we've seen like hints on Twitter of various places saying, oh, River wants Driussi. I'm like, of course they do, but they can't have him. Like, they can't afford Driussi. Then there's a report from someone named Pablo Noya that writes for La Página Millonaria, who reports that River is in talks with Austin FC and they're trying to sign Driussi right now. And I'm like, okay, maybe they're trying, but it's not going to happen because he was reporting a $9 million transfer fee. $9 million would be like top 4 all time incoming transfer fee for River Plate. They sell players for a lot more than that all the time, but they don't spend that kind of money on incoming stuff very often. So it just seemed crazy. And so as the weekend went on, I had notes written like, okay, maybe Driussi wants to go. Maybe they're trying to sign him, but I don't think this is going to get over the line. The weekend goes on, more and more stuff comes out. Bogart's talking about it. Bogart finally releases something on Sunday saying like, this is likely, like Driussi's probably going to be gone. And I'm just like shocked by it all. Like it just didn't seem realistic, but here we are. And it seems there's enough smoke here that it seems like it is a real thing they are trying to get done.
Yeah, it does. It for sure does. And originally, just like you, I'm like, well, this is just the rumor that always happens, but it seems like they want to get it done. We don't know anything. I don't know how long it'll take until we know anything. I think one of the other interesting thing in the Bogart reporting was that he said that if Austin sold Driussi, that they would look to find a replacement DP in this window.
This winter.
Yeah, this winter in this window. Because ultimately, like the Vazquez deal is good, but ultimately if you bring Vazquez in and you roll Driussi out, then as far as I'm concerned, like you're back in the same place. Like Austin has for the entire history of the club been waiting for the next big move. And if they don't also if we don't replace Driussi and add Vazquez, then we're back in the same place. And so that was encouraging to see that if Austin made that money, that would be reinvested back in the club. And then also we now know that the amount of money that Austin would be willing to spend on Vazquez was not dependent upon selling Driussi because Austin's made the deal for Vazquez without Driussi being gone.
Right. Yeah. So there have been several numbers reported about what this transfer fee would be. I've seen as low as like 5 or 6 million. I've seen as high as 12 or 13 million, I think. Let's split the difference. And I think the number we've seen the most is 6. I think 6 was reported a couple of different times. Let's say it's between $6 and $9 million. Should Roto take this deal?
That's like a question. This is okay. With a caveat, as always, like we're not in the locker room. We have no idea what's going on. If Sebastian Driussi really wants to go and we can get $8 million for him, no, wait. No matter what, given Sebastian Driussi's production over the last 2 years and his age, if Austin can get $8 million for him and is willing to reinvest it in another player, absolutely, Roto should take the deal.
Yeah. I think there's a really good argument to take it. I've expressed my concerns, and I think other people have as well, that this team isn't really built for him to fit into. The great season he had was dependent upon having a creator in form like Diego Fagundes. Diego fell off. Driussi fell off at the same time. We've not brought in another player after the Fagundes trade that could be that kind of creator. And we know that Driussi isn't really that kind of creator. He's more of a finisher. And so I'm not entirely convinced that Driussi and Brandon Vazquez are a good fit with each other. The last several years when Vazquez has looked so good, he has had these lock-picking, playmaking tins on his team with Acosta in Cincinnati, and then with Sergio Canales and I don't know, Cortizo, I don't know his first name, but some like really talented playmaking midfielders in those teams. I'm worried that this team wouldn't entirely suit him with Vazquez and Driussi in the team. And like you could say, okay, well, let's go sign a playmaker. And I think it's really difficult to fit a pure number 10 and Sebastian Driussi in the same team. And with all of our other players, there's ways you can work it, like move pieces around. But I think the most likely one would be like, okay, play two up top. What do we do with our DP winger then? It like gets really complicated to make the puzzle pieces fit. And a year from now, I think it would be easier. But right now, the Sebastian Driussi puzzle piece does not fit very well into this Austin FC roster. And so all that, along with his high salary, his reported desire to leave and go, and then if River can actually meet the demands of what Austin's asking, or at least get close, it's hard to say. It's hard to make a case not to take the money.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we talked about the positives. Like if they get free, the positive, it frees up roster construction. There's a bunch of money that comes in. Like it's hard to find the downside on that if Austin's able to get fair market value. I think the interesting, for me, I wrote this question in. What if we have a Driussi that wants to be gone, but River can't make the kind of offer that we think makes it fair? Like, what do you do then? You have like a Moody, like you have to keep him, right? You have to keep him when you have to try.
You do.
Yeah.
You can't let a player like hold you hostage like that. And
right.
I'd like to believe that Driussi is professional enough that maybe he won't be in the best mood and a little bit of a diva, but I'd like to think that if River can't give us a reasonable number for him, that he would come back and at least give it the old college try and like try to have a decent season, at least until this summer, and maybe something else could happen then. But but it's not an ideal situation at all.
I was gonna say on that, like if he's totally selfish, like he should try to be good just so he can make himself more money, even if he doesn't care about the team, you know?
Yeah. We had a question about kind of the impact of the sale as well.
Yes, basically.
Do you want to?
Yes, the question is, it's about the GAM and how much of it is basically applicable to this year. So, you know, if Austin sells him for $8 million in the past, that has not particularly been convertible into like money that you can go back and turn around and spend on players. So,
yes. Let's walk through like the whole scenario. Okay. So, like you said, like before, a DP sale couldn't necessarily be turned into any type of money that you could use on the roster budget. That has changed. And so let's give the example of they sell him for even a low number, $6 million. Let's say it's $6 million. From what I understand, reading through the rules, MLS would take a 5% cut of that. Austin FC would get the remaining 95% and would be able to convert up to $3 million of it into GAM that could then be used on the roster. I believe part of the question that we got on Blue Sky as well was like, does it all have to be used now? Because it almost seems like too much to use right now.
Yeah, the other question is like, what good is it to have this much in GAM in 2025? Can we apply some of it in 2026?
And the answer is yes. So the allocation money that is allocated by MLS year after year, I believe all of that has to be used in the year that it's given to you. If you trade for GAM, I think it's like 3 seasons that you can use it before they start docking you essentially and like cutting the amount in half that you have. But so for example, like the Diego Fagundes trade, I don't know if we got any allocation money out of the Romagna thing, but if we did, that would be another example. And then if Driussi goes, that money, any money that's traded in or out that is turned into allocation money, that can be used over the span of 3 years. So yeah, even if we aren't able to use it all this year, it would go towards next year.
Yeah, and that's the other big other part of that question. So there is a reason to pile up GAM, because the question was like, well, do you just have to go spend it all right now and give players crazy bonuses and then they like don't get the money in 2026? So yeah, a lot of upside on that one. What else do we have to say about Driussi?
Let's talk about like our concerns about selling him. So I think the obvious is that he's our best player.
Correct.
That Bogert is reporting that if his sources are saying that if Austin sells him, that they do plan on signing another DP player this winter. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. And if they are willing to move him, I'm sure that Borrell has been prepping for this. He has a list of players that he would like to bring in, but having a list and actually getting a big deal over the line are very different things. And so Driussi hasn't been as good as we know he can be, but even at his low, like bringing in someone to even be a little bit better than Driussi was in 2023 and 2024 is still a pretty big ask and much easier said than done. So that would be my biggest concern is like, how do we replace him and can we replace him?
Yeah, you definitely hit on the biggest part of that with like, if you spend the money. I remember, I think maybe it was Chase Hoffman that talked about like your DP success rate is 50-50 at best. I mean, it's better than other roster constructions, but you can spend all the money in the world and there's a 50% chance that we've let Driussi go, spent the money and been worse off after the fact. And certainly in the history of Austin, that has been the case. Although under Borrell, we assume that things are more successful, but I mean, it's not. You can't necessarily, even like with Osman Bukhari, like there's a lot of potential, but could you necessarily 100% call that a win? Like, not yet at this point. So like it is an iffy proposition. It's like what the devil you know is often better than what you don't.
Yeah, for sure. I think we can leave that there. Should we move on to our other new signing?
Yeah. So like all the way back 6 days ago for us, 1 week ago for everybody listening. I think that's why you left a gap in the broadcast on the Moon Tower After Dark, as if we got news. But yeah, Austin FC announced on Tuesday, December 31st, the club signed free agent midfielder Ilie Sanchez on a 1-year contract through the end of 2025 season with additional option for 2026. Sanchez, 8-year MLS veteran, played the last 3 with LAFC, 5 with Sporting Kansas City, MLS All-Star in 2018 and 2022, MLS Cup in 22, 2 U.S. Open Cups, LAFC's captain, and made the match-winning penalty kick. If you've ever seen the Continental Tire's head, you definitely remember that from the 2022 MLS Cup final. 20,000 minutes played over 262 matches from Spain, from the FC Barcelona Academy. So, great background. Also a wonderful, beautiful human. Finalist for the Humanitarian of the Year and Audi Goals Drive Progress Award. And I think really big with the, what's the United team? What's the,
the unified team.
The unified team. Yeah. Just like, and a lot of outpouring of love for him as a person and a leader and a player from people in Los Angeles. So there's a lot to get into on this. But
talking about his background in Barcelona, I was looking at the dates that he and Borrell
I was just going to ask academy. That. Yeah.
They were there some of the same years, both when like Borrell was coaching the academy, Ilie was in the academy, but it doesn't seem like any of the age groups matched up. So they were there at the same time. It's possible that Borrell coached him at some point, but it's also, it doesn't seem like that happened maybe. But in kind of digging through this, I learned some stuff about Sanchez that I didn't know. I knew that he was in the Barca Academy. I did not know that his grandfather was the director of the Barca Academy at one point. So it's not just he's from Barcelona and has ties. Like he has ties. Like he is Barca DNA for sure. And then just looking at the Barca B teams he played on, it's like all of the like that next generation after Pep's like great team, all the guys that people thought were going to be the next guys, and then some guys who actually did become. I'm thinking of like Gerard Deulofeu and Montoya and Mark Muñeza. There's just like a lot of guys. If you ever paid attention to Barca, you saw these guys play 10 games in a season or something like that. But then like Jonah Dos Santos was in that team with him and stuff. But so he's played with some really big players and just like wasn't going to be the guy to ever break into the Barca first team. And so he moved on and came to MLS, had a great career. A leader through and through. He was LAFC's captain and their MLS Players Association rep as well. And then Cherundolo is quoted as saying that Ilie is the team's strategic leader. He brings a lot of experience to this midfield that currently, if you're looking at our central midfielders, it is Danny Pereira and Owen Wolff, period. Like that is it. That's all we have. And so bringing in anybody is great. Bringing in a guy with this much experience that those two guys can learn from, and a guy who probably, we'll talk about this in our next little point, is like, what does our 11 look like? I think Ilie strolls right into this starting 11 at this point. As far as playing style he's very Barcelona, calm, clean, safe on the ball. And Ilie and Pereira midfield will be very hard to take the ball off of at the very least. And he's a little bit in like the Busquets mold. He's not entirely the same player, but similar in the sense that like his brain is just as, if not more important than his physical ability. And so he's not going to get a ton of goals or assists, but he can progress the ball with his passing. He can keep the ball with his ball control. And then he's just always in the right spot defensively. Like a little bit in the same way that like Dessler is on our team, that he's not going to be the kind of defensive mid that just covers a ton of ground and just like goes attacking dudes. But if you just watch him play a game, he's never in the wrong spot, never gets caught out.
Yeah, well, I think that I am personally excited. And I think that when we did our MLS free agent show a few weeks back, like he was the one guy that I talked about wanting to have on the club that seemed realistic. When you look past like the Jeremy Bobisi people that Austin was never going to afford. Now, the elephant in the room for a lot of people is the man's 34 years old. And Austin has a history of signing old guys who are on the downside of their career. I wanted to point out, in 2024, he played 46 matches. In 2023, he played 51 matches. In 2022, he played 38 matches. So this is not somebody, I don't have the minutes in front of me, but this is like not somebody who appears to be like on a downhill slide as far as his, obviously age could hit you in the face at any point in time. And maybe it will be, but there's no evidence to suggest that he's like backsliding in those terms.
Yeah, I do have some of the minute stats here. So in 2024, he started 24 games and played over 2,000 minutes. And I think the only reason he didn't start more is because they brought in Lewis O'Brien towards the back end of the season, and he kind of took that spot from him. But it wasn't because he was old and couldn't do it. It's because they brought in a better player to take the spot away. And then looking back at 2023, he was the minutes leader for the entire team. So he played more minutes than anybody on that team just 2 years ago. So, I mean, is it ideal to have a 34-year-old player that you're at this point relying on to play a lot of games this year? No, it's not. And like you said, like you can, at this age, it can hit you all of a sudden. But I think the good thing about him is that his game doesn't rely as much on that physicality. It's not going to be as much of a concern as, say, a Jossie Zardes who can't get onto a ball if it's not played directly to his feet. All that saying, like, injury is always a concern for older guys. So yeah, I think another positive to the age is he was on over $1 million for LAFC, and I think the last couple of years in Kansas City. Given his age, I have no idea what his salary is going to be, but you'd have to think it's not going to be anywhere close to $1 million.
Right, and we did get the news from Phil West that he is below the salary,
the TAM threshold, right?
below the TAM threshold. So like it is going to be a cut, and that also means that Austin.
So it'll be below that line is $743K in 2025, so it'll be below that number.
Yeah, and so you sign a guy who's your best midfielder who doesn't remove any flexibility in terms of being able to make future acquisitions. Does not seem like a problem. And so speaking of guys in their 30s who we thought might end up in Austin, you touched on this last week, but Austin did whiff on whiffed on Fafa Pico.
Maybe.
How do we feel about that?
I was thinking about this. Like, did they whiff or did maybe they did, maybe because he ended up signing with Miami, and if Miami wanted him, then they're probably in a better position to sign anybody, really. But I could see a reality where they were looking at both of these guys and were working out deals with both and like the Ilie deal better. Maybe that's not true. Maybe they did want Pico. All that said, I'd prefer Ilie. Like, Ilie's a bigger position of need at this point. I would have liked the Pico deal, but I think these two are the profiles are such that it was never going to be both. If that makes sense. Do you think that's true?
I think that's true. I think just where they sit, like with their age and their money and the other needs where Austin had, I don't think you can make both those. I don't think you can wisely make both those deals. I think that would really like hamstring Austin's flexibility to do anything else. So I think that's a good take to say, like, yeah, given the need and given the Vazquez signing in the attack, like it's fills a spot that Austin needed to fill with a guy who seems very capable of being able to do that.
Yeah, and so we want to go through what we see as Austin's starting 11 with this current roster. We'll do that after this next break, but first let's go through some of like the other rumors that we've seen recently and kind of how we think this fits into the roster build. So as recently as last week, we saw reports from, I can't even remember anymore, but I kind of think Bogert was one of the people talking about this, that Austin was interested in Swedish midfielder. Can't even remember his first name. Besard Sabovic.
Sabovic, right? For sure. Yeah, it was Bogert. It was. Because then Bogert also said, it's probably not going to happen later on.
Yeah. But that he's like a defensive midfielder. And the reason why that one might not happen is because he's getting calls from championship teams, Premier League teams. And so it might just be a thing where we can't afford him or don't have the cachet to bring him in. Another one brought up by, I think Adam Bin Laziz was saying that Austin was talking to Asier Iaramendi, who is a 34-year-old Spanish midfielder. Sound familiar? From FC Dallas. Bogert came out and said, my sources are telling me that's not true. So that one seems to, if it was ever true, it doesn't seem to be true now. I could see a reality where he was in the mix with Pico and Ilie, where whatever their hierarchy was of wants there, that if two of them fell through, that okay, we'll talk to Iaramendi. But again, I don't think Iaramendi and Ilie would have ever been a real option. Iaramendi is Basque. That's the part of Spain that I lived in, and he actually played at Real Sociedad while I was there. And so I would love to get a Basque player into the team, but I think our we've met our quota on 34-year-old Spanish midfielders. So at this point, I'll pass.
Yeah, so and I think the other thing is he had some history with Nico, right? Because Nico was in Dallas too, and Nico maybe even been the guy that brought him here. So these are probably not going to happen. But I mean, is there? I guess do we take anything out of these connections? I mean, it seems like so. There's ambition from. I've said that word like 3 times in this show, so like, don't let me do it again. It feels like Austin is still looking to improve the roster and not just fill in with like scrubs.
Yeah, and I think if we signed Pico and Iaramendi and Ilie, that is the opposite. That is a lack of ambition, and you're just taking kind of like aging players who you think you can get for a little bit cheaper instead of going and spending transfer fees. The fact that it's one, and that we hope that they are going to try to spend their money and use as many resources as they can on the limited roster spots. And I think this is a good time to take a break, and we'll come back and talk about our current starting 11, and then what additional rumors and like kind of context clues, like how we think they're going to use these additional spots, or these remaining spots, I guess.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty. The Sage Wilson team is made up of Austin experts who are client-focused and have over 30 years of combined real estate experience.
If you or someone you know are in need of Sage Real Estate advice in Austin, talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty. Be sure to check them out online at sagewilson.com.
Our premier sponsor is McGuire Woods Consulting, helping clients in the public affairs space from lobbying at the local, statewide, and federal levels to digital and communications campaigns across the country.
McGuire Woods Consulting has offices in 10 MLS cities and is proud to support Moon Tower Soccer and support Austin FC's march to the 2025 playoffs. Contact our friends at McGuire Woods Consulting at mwcllc.com for more information. All right, we are back. We are going to choose our Austin FC starting 11 based on the players currently on the roster. We know this can change, and hoping that it will change, but as of right now, who's our 11? We have 3 senior roster spots and 3 international roster spots at time of recording, and we're including Sebastian Driussi as a current player as well. So going through what we have now, I'll start from the back and just give my 11, and Jeremiah, you can agree or disagree or give me any possible variations you see. So Stuver in goal, of course. Center backs, I've got Svatak and Heinzike. I could see Cascante being the starter there. We can talk about that. Left back, Biru. Right back, Dessler. And then my midfield 3, if we're doing like a 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1 kind of thing that Austin has normally done, I've got Ilie and Danny Pereira as a double pivot, or if it's a 1-2 in the midfield, Ilie is the deepest lying, and then Pereira as part of the 2 further forward central midfielders, Driussi as the other attacking mid, then Obrian left wing, Brandon Vazquez center forward, Bukhari right wing. Any changes you would make there?
This is my 11 too, which we just talked about. Like, I wanted to have a different opinion, so we can have a little controversy, a little manufactured controversy, which we don't have. I think
we might have some controversy as to where we want to use our remaining roster spots. So sorry, finish
before we do that. I do have a couple things on this that are at least somewhat interesting. I agree with Svatak and Heinzike. I know that Josh Wolf valued Julio Cascante's ability to move the ball forward and to contribute offensively. From what you know about Nico Estevez, do you feel like he's a different enough coach that he wouldn't value that at the same level? And therefore, do you see the 2 strongest defenders playing, or do you see a war where he's also, like Josh's thing, although the goals never showed that, right, was like, even in defense, we're always, we're part of the attack.
Yeah, I mean, his center backs still touched the ball a lot in Dallas, and none of them could pass the ball like Julio can. So he might have wanted that. I don't know. So that'll be interesting to watch. Either way, I could see Julio being the guy if you can shore up the midfield and give him some cover to where he isn't as exposed defensively. But as far as like replacements go, looking at where we want these last 3 roster spots used, we might want, or maybe even could need, quality-wise, some upgrades in the back line, but I don't think we're going to get them at this point. So I kind of feel like we should look at the back 4 as set for now.
Like you feel like nonstop. Okay, so I would have a fullback as the third of my, if we're talking about 3. One of my 3 players I would want to bring in. It might not necessarily use an international roster slot on, but I feel like with Gallagher being your number 1 option here, maybe on both the left and the right, and I still do not understand why John Kolmanich is on this team and got extended, but I don't want to see him play very much. Like
Yeah.
that would be if we're going to count now from 3 to 1. Like my third biggest position of need would be a fullback.
I think, again, quality wise, I agree with you. I would like to have a better, like a stronger player behind Dessler or Biru that could play one of those sides. Roster space wise, I don't think we're getting it. I think whoever that next one down is going to be a supplemental player.
And that really becomes a problem if anyone gets hurt, right? Because this 11, this is a pretty good 11 if they all play 2,400 minutes, right?
Right.
You know, but if somebody goes down, then there's not a lot of depth. I mean, John Gallagher's great depth. You know, John Gallagher works hard. John Gallagher is
But he's depth at several positions.
Yeah, he's depth at several positions, and then so if he's in, and that removes a lot of flexibility from this roster overall. I guess my first choice to add would be to add another winger still, which is kind of why I like the Fafa Pico deal. But when you've got basically no backups on the right wing, you had John Gallagher on the left, although we know he's not like great at it. Like CJ, I feel like CJ Fodre at this point is a depth piece, and if he was going to break out, he would have done that now, and really hasn't. So like that's where I would start, is on the wing.
I would definitely sign a winger. I would like to bring in another midfielder, and midfield would honestly be my priority. I know there's a lot of people who would disagree with me on that. I was looking at so the North End, Zach from the North End has done a really great job of keeping a spreadsheet that you can find on their website of roster spots available and all the allocation money and all that kind of stuff. Looking at what he was saying, and I think Long Cow was also doing some math, is like, what can we afford? And it seemed to be, we can probably bring in one TAM player and then a couple of non-TAM players. If we're going to bring in one TAM player, like our highest profile player, which position would you use that on? Would that be your left wing?
I'd still be a winger for me. Yeah.
I wouldn't be mad about that. I could make an argument for it to be like an 8-6 kind of player. And I mean, I think this is where people would argue with me on this point is, okay, what do you do with Danny Pereira and Owen Wolf? And my answer is sit him on the bench. Danny's good and he's one of our best players, but using where Ilie is coming from as like a comparison, I don't think Danny Pereira plays very much in any LAFC team from the last 2 or 3 years. And Ilie wasn't starting in that team at the end of this last season. So if you can bring in another player, yeah, it sucks that a guy as promising as Danny Pereira, a guy as promising as Owen Wolf are going to lose out on minutes, but I don't think you ever heard LAFC fans complaining about having too many good midfielders.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's everybody else complaining about the fact that, I mean, every time you watch LAFC or Galaxy, especially, and you look at like the quality, the game-changing quality they can bring off the bench versus usually a like-for-like, slightly worse substitute that may be better because they're fresher that Austin has. Yeah, you want that. You want that competition. You want that people being hungry for minutes. You want people to be able to play in like other competitions like cups. So I could definitely see that being the call. And obviously, like you mentioned this off the top, but this is if Sebastian Driussi's not here, then this probably changes the whole calculus for both the 11, the formation, where you would call it. I mean, then for me, like, you know, a playmaking 10 definitely becomes like number one priority.
Yeah, is that where you go? Say we sell Driussi, we have that DP spot. That's what they're bringing in that DP spot. Is a like for like replacement, like bringing in an attacking midfielder? Is that where you go with that spot?
That's where I go with that, because I feel like that is the thing that allows Vazquez and Bukhari to both realize their most potential, is to have somebody they can put balls at their feet in dangerous situations.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I would say get a true 10, not this like 9.5 thing that Driussi is, because like we discussed earlier, it feels like a thing where with Driussi in this team, it feels like a 2+2 equals 3.5 kind of thing doesn't quite add up to 4, even though like the pieces are there and it just doesn't seem to quite work all the time. I think a true 10 in this, even if they're not as talented as Driussi, I think the right player, just a different profile, could fit better and make, instead of 2 plus 2 adding up to 3.5, maybe it adds up to 4.5 at that point, or at the very least adds up to 4.
Yeah. I don't. So that's another argument for maybe like making that move. If we can get something out of it, is to see how that the pieces all fit together better. Which I think. Do you want to talk about this Joe Lowery piece now? Because I believe Sebastian Driussi's influence is a part of this.
Yeah. So Joe Lowery on Backheel posted, I think this is a couple days ago. It was 10 predictions for the 2025 MLS season. One of them being about Austin FC. And his prediction is that Austin FC will be the team in the whole league whose point total drops the most from 2024 to 2025. You could tell me what you think. I think this is an absolutely wild take from Joe here. I really like Joe. I respect him. I think he's super smart. I think this is crazy.
I was going to get the context of it. So Austin's 10th on 42 points in 2024. And he says, it wouldn't shock me if Austin ended up around 28 points in 2025, which would be a 17-point drop. That's a wooden spoon territory for sure. That's like never being competitive. I just don't see how this team... Now, this is before... Because he does say if they're able to get the Brandon Vazquez deal over the line, it will raise the ceiling. Still, I'm not sure the Austin attacking setup can be fixed as long as Sebastian Driussi's in town. And the spine is a giant question mark. But still, yeah, I have a hard time buying that take that Austin's going to be that much worse, especially given that it continues to be that every move that Rodolfo Borrell has made to bring players in is the person who came in is better than the one that went out. And now they have an off season to work together. So like, do not see Austin retreating based off their 2024 performance.
Yeah, I mean, this is MLS. I want to be clear. I'm not saying that he's wrong because actually Austin FC is going to be really, really good. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you look at this roster, there's several quality players that we haven't seen exactly what they're going to be, but we know they're better than what we had for most of last year. I think if you roll out a healthy 11 from the end of 2024 for an entire season, that team makes the playoffs. And maybe they don't do anything in the playoffs. Maybe they're still not competitive, but that team makes the playoffs. If you have a full season of Dessler, a full season of Bukhari, like I just don't see a way to argue the fact that, yes, you can argue that maybe it's not a great team and maybe they're not going to do any better than they did last year. That's a valid argument. But to say that they're going to actually be catastrophically worse than last year, I don't get it. I don't see the evidence for that.
No, I agree too. It's like just like you said, maybe they won't be. Maybe they'll finish 10th again, and things will happen. But it's just like the fact that they would retreat to the bottom of the table just seems kind of crazy. And then Bogert had a different take, but we kind of covered. I feel like we don't need to talk about that. Like Tom Bogert's articles about Austin FC recently seem to show that this is the team that he. Reading between the lines, it seems to be that he feels like it's going to be better. And I only kind of bring both these up to bring up the point again, it is really, really hard to be a person covering the whole league and have an informed take. And so maybe that's just the situation Joe's in.
Yeah, and I'll say, like, part of Joe's reasoning is that he doesn't think Driussi is a great fit for this roster. And as we've discussed before, I agree with him. So I get where he's coming from on that, but yeah, not the rest of it.
We've got some random sort of bits and news that we should probably get into. Austin FC released their players of the year. Hunter Obrion on offense. Not surprising given results. Also, not surprising given how bad the offense was. Like, you feel like, what, at 8? Was it 8? Is that what he ended up with? I should know. He was on my Golden Boot team. Like, That's a decent offensive campaign. That should not be your offensive player of the year, I would say.
I mean, who
Obrien.
else should be?
Well, no. I mean, it just shows like how bad the attack was. Like
Yeah.
that he got it and it was deserving. But that just is an
Yeah.
indictment of everybody else.
Okay, I get what
Yeah.
you're saying. I thought you were saying it should have been someone else on the
No,
team.
no.
You're saying no, the standard should be higher than that.
No, right. Yeah. When I was like 35, my dad told me of his 4 children, he was the proudest of me, and he told me that was more a statement on the failure of my sisters than my success. I feel like it's the same with Obrien being the offensive player of the year.
You're the hotter Obrien of your family.
Of my family. Yeah. Defensive player of the year, Brendan Hines, Ike, and Brad Stuver. I don't think anybody's ever going to argue Stuver being around the defensive player of the year. It was good to see Hines get the recognition. It seems like the fact that he was one of 57 nominees for Defender of the Year in MLS, at least the one from Austin's probably also doesn't make that surprising too. Would you have somebody else you would slot into either one of those slots? We talked about offense, but like defensively, do you have a different player of the year?
No, I mean, I think Stuver, if you're picking one, it's Stuver. I think giving some flowers to BHI, I think I like that idea. It's an award that is picked by the club itself. It doesn't mean anything. There's no further implications. So if you can say something nice about a guy who came in kind of unknown on a flyer and had overall a pretty strong season, I'm all in favor of celebrating that.
Another piece of news, well, it's not really news. Another thing we got was on December 30th, and this is just something that makes me love this dude. So Osman Bukhari, for the 4th year in a row, hosted a Unity football tournament in his hometown in Ghana that he funds himself for 11 women's and 11 men's team, provides the gear, runs the tournament. I think he had some other MLS players. Was Latif Blessing kind of dropped by and hung out for a while, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So just gives back each holiday season to his hometown. I don't know.
And he not only funded the tournament, but paid like every team that participated. He gave them money to be able to fund their team with.
Yeah, there's just like a few hundred extra Austin FC jerseys in Ghana that wouldn't have been there otherwise. So like that can't be anything but good for like Austin and the growth of the brand.
Yeah, what I didn't like was the fact that
he
was playing on those pitches. I don't know how much he played, but he was in the team pictures. The only footage I saw of him playing was on like a nicer turf pitch.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping those are the only minutes he played, but I do not want him in any local Austin players. Kevin Morris, friend of the show, was saying that the photos looked like Northeast Metropolitan Park, which is a famously terrible set of soccer fields here in Austin. I don't want our DP player playing on that kind of field. So hopefully he didn't do too much of that.
I feel like he's the kind of guy that could probably knows when to put in the effort and not. But it was just I know there's some, I don't know. It's just always good to see like Austin players being like good humans, and it's good to see a person who's made a lot of money given his upbringing reinvest that back in the community, and that he's done that over time. Not just this year. It's good for us. And then we also got, I believe this is Nico Estevez influence, and I hope I got the date right because I didn't look it back up. But there's like an open practice at Q2, I believe, on January 19th for season ticket holders, which I thought was pretty cool. And I think we're gonna try to go.
I'm going to be out of town.
You're going to be out of town.
Day,
man. Yeah.
So I'm going to be recruiting you and my fellow nerds to be watching out for the kind of stuff that I would be watching out for if I were there, and report back. But yeah, it's a very cool thing. I know that it's a thing that for training, I think there was some like practice games that media was invited to, and then like the Verde Hill stuff where fans would come out and not necessarily invited, but just saying we're coming and we're going to watch this practice game over the hill. But training is the thing that fans have never been invited to. So I think it's probably part of kind of the charm offensive that we've seen the club go on since the hiring of Nico Estevez. And it's been great. And again, we talked about Josh Wolf getting more negative coverage because of the lack of any effort to build goodwill with the fans. I know part of that's like COVID and whatever else. There were some obstacles there. All that said, I don't know that he would have ever wanted to kind of do any of that other stuff either. I think the club has learned that, okay, this stuff can go a long way towards building goodwill, and that if Austin does have a rough start, if this season doesn't go as well as we want it to, I think fans will be a little bit more patient with everybody because of stuff like this.
Yeah, and I just looked the specifics up. So it's season ticket members on the 19th, 11:30 to 2. I got a bit terrified for a second because it said the time has been adjusted to account for the Austin International Marathon, which I was signed up
for. Are you
for.
Running in that?
Well, I'm signed up for the Austin International Half Marathon. So I thought for a second there it's a half. I thought I committed myself to an extra 13 miles that I wasn't ready for. So if you're from the team, if you're reading, it's the Austin International Half Marathon, not marathon. But yeah, 11:30 to 2. Watch players and coaches prepare. Food and drinks in the club spaces. Q&A session with select coaches. So it's made us cool access that people don't necessarily always get. And it's just like it's a sign of goodwill from the club to the community, which I kind of love.
Speaking of training, have we seen a confirmed date of when players will report back?
I have not seen one, but obviously it will be before January 19th.
I kind of think it's going to be in the next week or so. I know in the past it's been like players reported on a Friday or a Saturday, and they come in and do, I think probably like a physical and just like some kind of check-in things, and then reported back either the next day or the following Monday to actually start training. But in any case, it's going to be here quite soon.
Yeah, which means we'll have actual soccer to talk about. This week has been great to have so much excitement and news, but it'll be fun to talk about games again. I'm sure we covered this in the past, but like the Coachella Valley Invitational is coming up before too long, and we're only 6.5, almost 7 weeks from being back at Q2 on February 22nd. So it's coming fast. Every year the season ends, and I'm like, we're gonna have this long off season with nothing to talk about, and then somehow we get around this time of year, and it's like, oh, yep, it's time to go. Here we are.
Yep. So we're recording this Monday night. On Tuesday, January 7th, they're going to have an introductory press conference for Brandon Vazquez. I don't think I'm going to be able to go, but Jeremiah, I think you're going to be there. So we'll be able to report back on that next week and add some additional details to what we've covered today.
Yeah, and the thing I want to add on that is like the club has not announced that they're going to stream or anything this press availability, but the fact that it is going to be in the press room at Q2, which has the ability to do that and not in a random classroom at St. David's Performance Center, leads me to believe that maybe there will be like a stream that we'll hear about today for those of you listening, tomorrow for us tonight, that you'll be able to watch. But yeah, regardless, I'll be there. We'll ask what we can. I think it'll be a super interesting availability, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Anything else before we finish up?
No, let's go ahead and finish up.
All right. We'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Come find us on the internet. Jeremiah has been manning the Moon Tower Soccer account on Blue Sky a bit more lately, so some activity there. It's been, I think we've officially reached critical mass there. I think there's a decent enough little community that if you're a person who doesn't want to be on Twitter anymore, you can go to Blue Sky and have a good time.
And this may be overreacting to it, but I feel like Blue Sky is just fun at this point in time. Like Twitter was at one point, where like I posted like some stupid "It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia" meme, yesterday, and it's like that's okay. Like not everything has to be so serious, and like we're worrying about the downfall of society now, but like it can be entertaining.
The app also just seems to work, which the Twitter one seems to have been broken for like the last year and a half. Anyway, sign up for the Patreon. You're kind of in the sweet spot Patreon wise, where you can kind of double dip reward wise in a pretty short amount of time. We're going to start working on our 2025 rewards, but we do still have the 2024 stuff. So if you sign up now, we're going to send that to you, and then we'll send you the 2025 stuff whenever we get all that finalized. So check that out. Thanks so much for listening. We will be back next week with a report from tomorrow's Brandon Vazquez press conference. We're planning on diving into the 2025 schedule with a guest. We've been planning on doing that for a bit now, but too much news to cover this week, so we asked them to push back a week, and they graciously agreed. And then, yeah, we'll cover any other Austin FC news that breaks, which, if this week is precedent, could be a lot. Until then, I'm Landon Cottam.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Thank for nothing, see you never.
La gente
Oh my God.